Testing this sound. How's the volume out there? Oh, one way or another. Jamie will watch for that. Um, Welcome back to MISIC's regional meeting. I'm Ann Bartelt. I am a MISIC team member, and I work primarily with the C3 cadre and the licensure renewal program. So today I'm going to talk with you about literacy and social studies. And it was a little disheartening to me to see that social studies is part of that new state assessment. I know that's a real struggle for social studies teachers. I hear from them, especially at the secondary level, about that. But we are going to do the best we can in thinking about how we promote social studies. I also want you, as I work through this presentation this morning, which hopefully will have some interaction, I want you to think about the things that April talked with us about the integration of the standards and the instructional practices and the instructional materials, because those are what I'm going to demonstrate for you this morning and model for you and show you how that all works together. And this is something that MISIC has been promoting for many, many years as a foundational element of just high quality instruction. So I'm going to start with, if you go to the, shall I go to the next? Jamie and I are still getting coordinated here. It's not working. No. So, and my battery's dead. Okay, let's go to the book, Jamie. We're going to start with a book. As if you know, are familiar with our unit planner, text and text sets are the thread that connects everything in a quality unit. So we're going to start with this nonfiction book, Angel Island, The Gateway to Gold Mountain. And I'm going to read to you just a couple of opening paragraphs. And as I'm reading this, I want you to think about, what questions do you have? What questions come to mind? And those of you here in my live audience, I'm going to ask you what these questions are. And those of you who are with us on Zoom, if you put those in the chat box, we'll take a look at those as well. So this first chapter starts with Where the Walls Speak. Alexander Weiss had just started his job as a California State Park Ranger on Angel Island in San Francisco Bay when he came across an old abandoned building. Off limits to the public, its windows boarded up, the two-story wooden structure stood dark and deserted behind a barbed wire fence. On an impulse, Weiss decided to venture inside and look around. He pulled open the door. The floor creaked as he entered. The electricity had long since been turned off, so he found his way through the empty rooms and up the stairs with his flashlight, stepping over litter and broken glass. Paint was peeling from the walls and ceiling. The building smelled musty. In a large room on the second floor, Weiss noted markings that seemed to be carved into the walls. Moving closer, he saw that the marks appeared to be Chinese calligraphy covered by a thin layer of chipped paint. I looked around and shined my flashlight up, and I could see that the entire walls were covered with calligraphy. And that was what blew me away, he remembered. People had carved the stuff on every square inch of wall space, not just in this one room, but all over. Although he couldn't read the inscriptions, he recognized their historical importance. Angel Island had once been a busy immigration station where people hoping to enter the United States were examined and questioned and often held for days or weeks or even months while immigration officials decided their fate. For many immigrants, Angel Island was the gateway to a new life in America. But for others, those who were denied entry to the United States, it was a locked gate through which they caught just a glimpse of America before they were sent back to their native land. While waiting for their cases to be decided, Chinese immigrants carved or painted row after row of poems on the walls of their detention barracks, telling of their long voyages from China, their confinement on the lonely island, their longing for families back home, their frustration, anger, and despair. And while I'm going to stop right there. So, we think about what you just heard. What questions do you have? What are you curious about? I want to know what they were despairing about. What were they despairing about?
How did immigrants know to go to Angel Island?
How did immigrants know to go to Angel Island? Went to Angel Ellis Island in New York. So what we do, what we're working on here, the variation of the question formulation technique. And what works best for that technique is you start with some kind of prompt or passage that gets students thinking and helps with their curiosity and their wonder. And gives about 5 minutes questions as we can, not stopping to judge the question, not trying to answer the you can't. I would use it with, and the unit I'm going to show you here is I've developed as a model for third graders because you'll see here the Iowa Standards and Social Studies theme for third grade is immigration. But I would use this book and I would read it to them, parts of it to them, so that they could hear the story. And then it's full of actual pictures from the Angel Island itself. So that would be a way that I would jumpstart this unit. So let's go to the next slide then, Jamie. So our essential question here really for my presentation with you today is how do we develop solid, effective curriculum and instruction that helps all students be college, career, and citizenship ready? Right? And if we think back to the things that April talked about, we're thinking about that curriculum and instruction, how that all works together. So my learning targets for our session today is about developing units based on standards, integrating inquiry, content, and literacy standards, those social studies standards with the literacy standards, and then what is the importance of a quality text set, and how do we design engaging learning opportunities that implement quality text as an integral element of our instruction. So if you think about what April said about instructional materials and instructional practices and those standards, this is really that whole integration that we're looking at together. Okay, next one. So these are the Iowa Social Studies standards. As theme, and they're thinking textbook does not become the foundational materials. Quality texts do instead. And as you know, through your work with MISIC, quality text means not only trade books like we just looked at Angel Island, but also videos, websites, blogs, posters, graphics, newspaper clippings, all of those different kinds of things. So one. So at our early workshop grade levels, and they looked at their themes for their grade level, and they asked questions around that theme, and then she asked them to select one of those questions and drill down into more questions with that and become more specific about that. And then what would be the content and inquiry and literacy standards that would go with those questions. So of the third grade teachers at that time, and really some very, very rich questions came out of their exploring this whole idea about immigration. And with those questions, then you start to think about your text. So go to the next page. So our unit planner, Sue has adjusted the social studies planner to include with the curriculum and learning targets our inquiry standards as well. Okay, so you know those are there, but notice here in our thread throughout the whole unit, straight for you things that you can do with text to help support all of that. Okay, next one. start. I did with this book, because this is a notable book. Teachers. And then that to the book, The Dragon's Child, A Story of Angel Island. And I ended up borrowing that book from Ames Public Library. And I had to return it because it was interlibrary loan. And then when I returned it, I thought, well, I really need to buy this book. So I went on my favorite site, Amazon, and bought it. But when I bought that, Amazon, of course, always has recommendations, right, for you. Oh, if you like this book, then this book. And that's how I found Letters from Rivka. And Letters from Rivka is the story of Russian immigration in the 1930s. Written by Karen Hesse, and I immediately recognized that name as an award-winning author. So I thought, well, this has to be a good book. And then next slide. And then the other thing that was in the bibliography was this book, Island. And Island is a book of the poems translated from the walls in Angel Island. And they're organized by different categories or subjects for people coming, how they're feeling, and that kind of thing. This book, I ended up and I made copies of it before I had to return it, of some of the poems that are in it. So they're organized by different ways of thinking about their experiences within Angel Island. And then we know how the importance of video. So then I went on YouTube, or another favorite site, and I found two really important videos. This one that you see on your screen is prepared by the National Park Service about this video tour of Angel Island that would be really good for kids to see. And then the next one, Jamie. And then the library also. So those of us who've been use those pictures in the library or conversation starters for kids. So that's what I did to pull my text set together and thinking about immigration. So next one. So as I really think that this unit planning and quality planning is a and back thinking about our standards and our texts and our activities, what we want kids to do. So we're starting with standards, but how am I going to teach these? So then we go and we find a high quality text, and then we go back to our standards to see, will these texts help me address these standards? Will I be able to teach to these standards? Will I be able to assess these standards? So inquiry standards, thinking about the compelling questions, and we had those back with the chart that the teachers had done, and then constructing responses, of course, to those compelling questions, and then thinking about the challenges and opportunities when taking action. Now, we know that immigration is just a hugely controversial issue right now in America. I don't think I'm going to address that with third graders. Yet they are fascinated with the Statue of Liberty in Ellis Island. Angel Island is a new perspective for them, especially those of us here in Iowa. Well, actually, both coasts are, farther away, but we talk about going to New York City to see the Statue of Liberty. We don't talk about going to San Francisco to see Angel Island. So it does open up some things for kids. Next slide. Content standards are that the teachers themselves selected for this unit are about the effects, opportunities, and conflicts that happen when people from different social groups come in contact with each other. And there is a portion in these books about how the Chinese people were treated in Angel Island. And then historical examples about scarcity, pushing people to make choices. Why did people come to America? And then thinking about taking risks and what that means to move to a new place. And then using the map to explain how human settlements and movements relate to locations. There is in the Angel Island Station video a piece about where the people came from that came into Angel Island. And that was one of the questions you asked earlier about Angel Island. How did they know to come here? Who else came here? So that's a really good piece. It's always good to get that geography in there if you can. So that's important. All right, and then the literacy standards. Now, when I'm thinking about literacy standards in my social studies content, I'm really thinking about what it is I'm going to ask kids to do as part of their learning opportunities. What reading am I going to ask them to do? What writing am I going to ask them to do? What speaking and listening opportunities am I going to give them? How might we play with language? So when I was developing this unit, I was thinking about my activities and the standards, or I'm thinking about the standards and then what learning opportunities can I give students to address those standards and to assess them. So I've got, of course, asking and answering questions, thinking about the text, thinking about the relationship between a series of historical events, because we're reading this is reading informational text, thinking about the vocabulary words. Again, those of us who have been with MISIC, we understand the high connection between text-dependent questions and vocabulary. So that's a piece of that. And then the next one, on writing and speaking and listening, those take me to my other learning opportunities that I'm going to give kids as part of this unit. Okay. It's in your materials about the Dragon's Child. There's a passage from the Dragon's Child that has text-dependent questions at the bottom of it, and it also has some underlined vocabulary words. So what I would do with this is I would read it, and then I would ask children to go back into the text to answer the text-dependent questions. When I created this, I used the word markup tool to help me with that, where I would just highlight the piece, the section, and then what's my text-dependent question that goes with that. So I knew exactly where I would find those answers. Also, you can use that markup tool as a scaffold for students. You can highlight that area, ask them a question in the markup box, and then they have to go back to that highlighted area to find the answer. So that really works pretty well. So I had always known I would have to leave home. Our village's land was so poor that men in my clan always had to work elsewhere. My grandfather had been one of the first to cross the ocean to the Golden Mountain. Others went to different countries. For generations, my clan had been like rice chaff, scattered in the wind all over the world. Life was supposed to get better after we drove the Manchus out of China 11 years ago. Father had even returned from America to be with us for the happy times. However, things had only gotten worse. Powerful generals had set up their own little kingdoms. Then they began to fight one another. Mother prayed every night that the soldiers would stay far away. So let's stop then. And our first text-dependent question is, what is the Golden Mountain first mentioned in paragraph 2? What details in the passage confirm your answer? I've read far enough to help you with that. What is the Golden Mountain? America, right. So do you feel like you kind of should guess to that, Jason? America? No? What's your clue that it is for third graders? We have to kind of be third graders here for a moment. What's your clue that America is what the Golden Mountain refers to?
In 3, it says Father had even returned from America.
Right. So America is mentioned there in paragraph 3. It's mentioned also again in paragraph 6, and I didn't read all the way there just as a matter of saving time. One of my older brothers, Wen, had left to join him in America.
And 2, they talk about crossing the ocean.
Yes, crossing the ocean. So children would need to know a little of their geography to help them with that, wouldn't they? Okay, question 2. What details in paragraph 2 support the author's statement that the family was scattered all over the world? What helps us?
Went to different countries.
It went to different countries. What else?
Scattered America all over.
So it says it, but what details help us understand what that means? So what details support that conclusion that they were scattered all over, like the wind all over the world? What else? Think in that second line of that paragraph. Sue mentioned it earlier. Right, first across the ocean. Okay, now I want you to look at question 4. Our essential question is, why do people move? And specifically, what brought immigrants to America? Our author starts this passage by saying, I had always known I would have to leave home. How does this passage answer the questions, why do people move, and what brought immigrants to America? Okay.
It's the only thing I can figure.
Okay.
If I turn your color.
Yep.
That's our problem. Or we can get it closer. That's better.
Okay. Let Jamie know if this is helping. So always, I think, with text-dependent questions, if you think about moving from part to whole, if you think about moving from key ideas to main ideas or theme ideas, your questions are going to move from key details to theme. So I made sure with this series of text-dependent questions that I came back to that main idea. Okay, Jamie, the next, let's go to the next. Because here, this is about academic vocabulary. So I did a word sift with this piece, and word sift is one of those tools that Sue has taught us, our social studies work. But with that, generations was the word that showed up as a social studies word in word sift. So I'm going to ask us to think about what the word generations means. So it could be that I just need to tell my third graders what it is. So we use the see it, say it, define it, say it method. You see it, and then I might say grandparents are the first generation, your after that, and then you are the third generation. What do we call the generation that came before our grandparents? And their answer would be great-grandparents, so they start to make those connections. They can follow that. And then with the word chaff, I might tell them that chaff is the grain that comes off before we use or eat the grain. So I might ask, what, like rice chaff scattered in the wind, I might ask, what does this description tell you about chaff?
It's light that blows to the wind.
Right, that it's very light and it blows away easily. Okay, so our family then, so what's the connection then? How does that describe our family? That we have moved about easily and we are scattered. And then the other words I have marked here are droughts and plagues. So drought, they know what a drought, our kids probably know what a drought is, a very, a dry time period when the grass turns brown and everything goes limp. They wouldn't know this in the spelling probably. That would be a word that they wouldn't recognize, but they know it through their oral vocabulary. So we could talk about that. And then plagues as well, a serious disease that kills many people, which takes me then to thinking about the word woes. So if life could be hard with droughts, floods, insects, and plagues, and that added to our woes, what might woes mean? What are our woes? And how would they respond to that, third graders? Trouble. Pardon? Sadness. Stress. Hard times. So for one of the questions for this text-dependent question was, from the description in paragraph 5, which has these vocabulary words in it, what word would you use to describe life in China? Well, third graders would probably say, well, it's really hard. Well, what details help you know that? And then you would go back in and be able to work with it. So that, I think, shows you. Amy. So back to our standards, we're thinking about our that embedded with those text-dependent questions. How did they think that would be helpful to them? And then thinking about answering those questions and using relevant details from text. And then the next one on our content standards, thinking about those conflicts and those historical examples of scarcity. Life was certainly scarce, so we could talk about that word scarcity and what that means, and how they would have seen that in that passage, and then how people take risks. Okay, and then of course, that's when we through our literacy standards, looking at our vocabulary. Okay, now the next piece I would do, and thinking about this unit, of course, this all isn't happening in one day, one time period, but it's over the course of days and the unit development. I would think about the connection between my texts, my Dragon's Child, the island poems, and then this letters from Rivka. So I want to, if you look at the next page of your handout, what I did there was I took introductions to 3 successive chapters. So this Dragon's Child book was written, it's really historical fiction, but the author interviewed her grandfather and talked with him about his experience coming to Angel Island. So that's the question comes from the author, and then the pop, her grandfather, is his answer. So what did you think of America when you first got here? What happened to some of the others that you were with? And what was it like on Angel Island? Okay. And then I coupled that with the poem, taken from a wall, directly translated from a wall. Imprisoned in the wooden building day after day, my freedom withheld. How can I bear to talk about it? I look to see who is happy, but they only sit quietly. I am anxious and depressed and cannot fall asleep. The days are long and the bottle constantly empty. My sad mood, even so, is not dispelled. Nights are long and the pillow cold. Who can pity my loneliness? After experiencing such loneliness and sorrow, why not just return home and learn to plow the fields? We could bring in the word woe here in with this poem and talk about that. So then what I would do, so that's poetry. And the value of poetry is it helps us understand the essence of to the main, the theme, and it helps us think about tone. Okay, so I want to read to you a short passage. And what I would ask students to do with this is think about how this passage could be created into a poem similar to the format, tone, structure, message of the poem we just read from Island. Now, letters from Rivka. She is with her family. They are fleeing Russia, and she writes back to her cousin Tova, who only stayed behind. Okay? Awful things are happening to me, Tova. My hair is falling out, my long blonde hair. I have a bald patch over one ear and another on the back of my head. I can cover it with a kerchief, but it itches and itches. I know I must be ugly because Mama's eyes look away from me all the time now. Can't Mama stay with me, I asked. The lady from the Hebrew Immigration Assistance Society, Immigrant Aid Society, lost my place, said, if your mama goes to America, she can work and make money for the family. She can make a home for your father and your brothers. If your mama stays in Europe with you, she will cost the family money. Only you must stay, Rivka. I will not stay in Warsaw, I told the lady from the Aid Society. If my family leaves me in Warsaw, I will find a way back to my home in Berdichev. The lady from the society said, I want you to leave Warsaw also, but not for Berdichev. The cure for your illness awaits you in Belgium. Mama said, Belgium? What is Belgium? I've never heard of this place. It is the best place for Rivka now, the lady said. The people of Belgium open their arms and their homes to immigrants. That is what I am, Tova. That is what you are when you are wandering between two worlds. You are an immigrant. The lady said, we can arrange for Rivka to stay with a family in Antwerp. She will go each day to a hospital and get treatment for her ringworm. When you are all better, Rivka, you can sail to America right from Antwerp and join your mama and papa and all your brothers. I don't want to stay with a family I don't know. The lady said, in Antwerp, there will be someone from my organization to look out for you, to monitor your care. I said, if I can't go to America, please send me back to Berdichev. Rivka, Papa said, you cannot go back to your home in Berdichev. We have no more home in Berdichev. You too would meet your death if you return now. Your coming back would put all the family remaining in great danger. I don't want to put you in danger, Tova. I must go to Belgium. I see that, but I feel so frightened. What will become of me now? Tova, I am like an orphan now. Certainly that addresses the hardships, so that students would work with that content and they'd have their poem model. And of course, you have to scaffold for them. You don't just say, go write a poem. You walk them through the process and you teach them what that looks like. But here's Rivka's poem, the next slide in our PowerPoint. It's in the PowerPoint, yep. So here's Rivka's poem. How awful I feel right now. My long blonde hair falling out. My head with bald patches, itching and itching. I cannot be with my family who go on to America. I must stay behind in a different country, not my homeland. I feel like an orphan, all alone, wandering between two worlds. I am an immigrant. So I love of the passage. Are they able to pull out the relevant details and use them in a way to create that meaning? Length, line length, where that breaks. You talk about their punctuation with poetry, all of those different kinds of things. Fun to do. Okay, so next standard then of creating engaging audio recordings of stories of poems. So I would have the students record their poem. So it would become we could have an audio book of poems from Rivka and from other situations. We probably wouldn't write just one poem. We might do it a couple different times, different contents. Okay, then this is the last instructional activity, the story behind the poem. So I have just a clip of a video for you from public television, Northern California television. So let's go to that. And this is a gentleman talking about his experience at Angel Island. That's what I want this to.
My name is Dale Ching, and I was here detained back in 1937. I was here for 3.5 months.
Dale Ching was 16 years old when he first came to America. Even though his father was born in the United States, he still had to go through the immigration station.
So when you got off the ferry, what I call it, a welcome party is waiting for us, which is armed guard uniform. Well, you're lonely and you're afraid of it. You're not going to be able to see your family at all. You will be all by yourself here. Just look at outside, you got the high fence and barbed wires all around it. I'm just waiting for it to be free from here.
Compare that with a passage from the book Life in the Detention Barracks. And again, just a passage that I would read to the students. Slide, Jamie. So if you again, we're going back to those questions that we started with, and we're thinking about our standards and what was life like for people who came to Angel Island. Did they fulfill their American dream? Probably not immediately. And then what did it take for that? For what problems did they face and how did they overcome them? Next slide. So then, lastly, to get in their writing and to think of action piece that we have in our inquiry standards. Yeah. So an opinion might be about them entering the United States and why did we have to go to Angel Island and have this detention center, if you will. Why not just the open doors? Okay, so we've rushed through this. So this is my literacy standard. Next slide, about writing that opinion piece. Next slide. There's an Irish immigration text set that you can use. And this experience came in through Ellis Island. So there might be some comparison and contrast between Ellis Island and Angel Island that would be fun. Particularly maybe at the extension level, something for you to think about there.
And it occurs to me that some communities have that the composition is a certain ethnicity. Like my hometown was mostly German, so it would be interesting to maybe try to, to really make it more relevant, as to tie into an ethnic group that tends to be kind of made up of community, if that's true. Right. There is a predominant one.
So Sue's talking about perhaps in your community, you have a certain ethnicity that is pretty strong, like it's a German town, for instance. So generations came into Chicago and then eventually made it into Iowa. So that would be a good research project for kids. Then the next slide. So we have here this Angel Island first came from one of these resources, and they are excellent resources for teachers with a list of quality trade books through the years, and they just may spark for them a unit or maybe connected to something that they've been teaching, and they can enhance their unit with quality trade books. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. I'm not going to do that. And finally, it's all about making sure students are C3 ready, college, career, and citizenship ready. So thank you for the opportunity to share this with you this morning. I hope that you really get involved with the text sets.
Awesome, man. Hey.